I don't need to introduce myself. I'm already very well presented. I'm a volunteer teacher at an international institution. Essentially, it is an organization that exists worldwide and has many other teachers besides myself. I invite those who are not yet familiar with us to visit our YouTube channel, where more than 200 lectures are offered free of charge. Let us move on to our topic for today. How can philosophy contribute to the promotion of mental health? This topic, which was requested of me, I have approached with great care and with a caveat that I would like to begin with. It is very necessary. Philosophy is not psychiatry, nor is it psychology. Nor could I presume to offer opinions on therapies related to pathology A, B, or C. That would be inappropriate on my part, certainly invasive, and, at a certain level, even irresponsible, considering that we are talking about health. And one does not play with such matters. In fact, when it comes to human nature, nothing should be taken lightly, should it? Therefore, we will place the advice of philosophy within that which properly belongs to philosophy. I intend to speak about reflections that suggest attitudes. Above all, these are linked to the question of human values, which reveal themselves, and this too is the subject of much research. Over time, they have proven to be a highly effective form of therapy. The practice of values. And here, indeed, we are well within the realm of philosophy. Philosophy deals precisely with this question of values, both as prevention and as an attitude that can lead, with the support of all other necessary fields supported by psychiatry, by psychology, with which we coexist harmoniously, to suggesting some solutions for problems that have already arisen, those that are already being experienced. So, once, in conversation with a psychiatrist, it is very common. I am a teacher for 32 years, a volunteer teacher. It is common that over these 32 years there have been episodes, sometimes, in fact, I must say, as time has passed, in recent years, an increasing number of students who are depressed, of students who are anxious. The growth of this has been considerable, although I have never stopped to carry out any kind of statistical analysis. But within the sample, which consists of students interested in philosophy, there has been an ever-increasing number of cases. And in conversation with this psychiatrist, he told me something that made perfect sense to me. In the case of psychiatry, when a medication is recommended, what is actually being done is to recommend something that restores lucidity to the patient, so that, once lucid, they can seek out solutions to their own problem. In other words, it is not expected that a medication will provide a cure for a symptom, whatever its nature may be, but rather that it will restore the lucidity that was lost. So that this person may acquire a mental attitude, pursue a mental stance and a concrete way of life that can transform the trigger of those symptoms, that can act upon that trigger. I found this explanation very interesting. And from there, I considered, and I still consider today, that a partnership between psychiatry, psychology, and philosophy in the treatment of human afflictions, whether psychological or psychiatric in nature, is a very successful and welcome partnership. Because once we seek to identify the triggers, then indeed, philosophy serves this purpose very well. Psychology as well. Without a doubt, psychology addresses the personal causes that influence those triggers. Now, we encounter human beings who have very pressing questions about what it means to be human. What is expected of a person within the framework of life? What is justice? What is fraternity? Why should we practice these values? Why should we be good? And here, we find ourselves within the realm of philosophy. In this sense, then, let us discuss the contribution that philosophy offers to human mental health. Why do we suffer? This is one of the most, let us say, immediate questions for human beings. Once, something happened to me before the pandemic, in the pre-pandemic period. I was passing by an institution where I had been invited to give a lecture, much like here, and I saw a mother guiding her little son. He was a child who must have been about 7 or 8 years old, no more than that. She was probably taking him to a medical or dental appointment, judging by the boy's behavior, which was one of total resistance. He absolutely did not want to go. He grumbled, cried, and yet the mother kept leading him along. After a while, he stopped grumbling, stopped crying, turned to his mother and asked, "Mom, why do we have to do things that hurt?" "Because you always tell me that things that hurt are good." And the mother had no patience for that question and kept dragging the boy along. I found the question so remarkable. If I could, I would have sat down right there on the floor with that boy to have a conversation about it. Look, you must agree that, as adults today, it is very rare for us to ask this kind of question. We become very attached to the superficial, to the banality of everyday life. To ask why we must suffer, and even more, why suffering from time to time might be good. That is pure philosophy. I kept wondering at what point in our lives this deep and essential curiosity is stolen from us. And most importantly, the boy's face did not lie. He truly wanted an answer. And today, it takes a tremendous effort to get men, adults, and mature individuals to formulate this question and, even more, to genuinely desire an answer. It is in honor of this philosopher child that lives within each of us that I dedicate myself today, together with you, to seeking an answer to this question. Well, the Buddhist tradition, which is the sacred book par excellence of Buddhism, teaches that pain is a vehicle for consciousness, a means of correction. From a physical perspective, this is very clear. That aching tooth allows you to save it before it is irretrievably lost. And so it is with all bodily pains. Sometimes, when it hurts, it is already too late. Today, we have preventive exams that are wonderful. But, in general, pain warns us that something is wrong and allows us to seek the correction of that error. This happens on the physical level, and we are aware of it, and we practically act immediately, without delay. We seek out a doctor, a dentist, whatever is needed. From a psychological perspective, however, this is not always the case. We should heed the call of our pains to see what within us needs to be corrected. What is the sharp edge that needs to be polished? And if we look at this broad and ancient tradition, which is Buddhism, they take this question as central to their philosophy. Buddhist philosophy focuses especially on this very issue. Why do we suffer, and how can we act rightly in relation to pain? If we consider a philosophical school, which is Stoicism nowadays, fortunately, Stoicism has come back into fashion. You may have heard quotes from Epictetus, Seneca, or Marcus Aurelius. They spoke in a very direct and practical way about human problems, and they lived in a time of crisis. That is why they feel so close to us today. Marcus Aurelius, who was a great philosopher emperor of Rome, used to say the following: "Nothing happens to a human being that is not inherent to humanity. Therefore, nothing happens to Lucia that is not inherent to Lucia." This is known as the theory of responsibility. What does this mean? It is as if we imagine, speaking in our current language, that we came into this world for a purpose. This would be a truism, a fundamental truth. We came into the world to grow as human beings, to leave this place a little better than when we arrived. This seems to me to be a very acceptable basic premise. We came here to grow as human beings, to leave a little greater than when we arrived, to move even slightly away from ignorance and toward wisdom. And this is the principle of philosophy: love is wisdom, and to walk toward it. If this is truly the case, taking it as a possibility, we can perceive that it is as if we come into the world with an encrypted card, which attracts to us the situations that allow us to polish those rough edges. We need to polish ourselves so that we fit better into the puzzle of life, to better fulfill our role as human beings, to be fulfilled, to become more complete. So, when you come, your personal power has this magnetism that attracts to you what allows you to grow, what will smooth your sharp edges, this person, this situation. They did not enter your life for a random or purely personal reason. This person entered my life to pursue me, to harm me. No. If this person is, for example, annoying, they are annoying because that is the best they have managed to be within their own evolutionary journey, but they entered your life because you called them. In other words, perhaps after some time you realized that you needed to develop patience, empathy. Or perhaps, in truth, the one who is truly annoying is you. This person allowed you to see that. If it hadn't been this person, it would have been someone else. But you would still need to go through this experience. Why? Your need for experience in order to grow attracts the elements into our lives that will allow us to emerge on the other side greater, because that is the expected response when facing difficulties. We should commit ourselves to only coming out the other side greater than when we entered. This is the idea behind the theory of responsibility, which depersonalizes. Thank you, the agents of our suffering. And this is already very good, because it directly combats something called victimization. It is one of the gateways to our psychological problems, one of the most acute and intense. So, the theory of responsibility offers us an escape from powerlessness in the face of difficulties. Nothing happens to a human being that is not inherent to being human. Therefore, it is also inherent to human beings to find a way out of it. Epictetus, another Stoic philosopher who was a slave, once said the following: when someone pejoratively called him a slave, he replied, "Do you know what a slave is? It is someone who, in matters that depend on them, does nothing. And in matters that do not depend on them, they endlessly protest and complain." So, imagine, my friends, that I intend to arrive at Pupex at a critical hour, 6 o'clock in the evening. We all know what the monumental axis is like. I leave with just enough time to get here, and I end up being late. And, along the way, I start protesting against the city administrator, against the drivers in traffic, against the whole world. When, in reality, I can do nothing about these things. But leaving half an hour earlier is something I could have easily done. That depended solely on me, and I did not do it. That is what it means to be a slave. When it comes to what depends on me, I do nothing. And when it comes to what does not depend on me, as the saying goes, I wrestle with a bear holding a knife by the blade. So, the theory of responsibility also takes this into account. Just as nothing happens to a human being that is not inherent to humanity, no problem is greater than our capacity to respond. And when a problem enters our lives, it honors us and reveals the measure of our resilience, our capacity to overcome, our ability to respond, and to emerge greater on the other side. Problems are proportionate to the stature of human beings. Continuing on, let us consider the tools that human beings possess for this purpose. And this is something that brings me great joy, because there has been an increasingly unified language across the three fields I have discussed. It is not difficult today to find psychiatrists, psychologists, and therapists from the most diverse schools who affirm that the development of values is important for the recovery of human beings in relation to their suffering. And philosophy deals precisely with this. Do human values serve to alleviate problems related to mental health? Or can they represent a mental attitude, what is now commonly referred to as a mindset? Can it mean a mindset that helps you develop greater immunity against these afflictions? Or even reverse the harm that has already taken hold? Could it be? It seems so. And here we enter the philosophical field, properly speaking. I will begin by working with you on three values, because I am basing myself on the Platonic criterion. I will not go into detail about this, as it strays too far from our main topic. Plato spoke of unity, that the universe begins with the one from unity, and from this arises the first spatial form, which is the tetrahedron. The tetrahedron, which is a pyramid with triangular faces and base, represents the one which, when manifesting in the world, requires a base with at least 3 points. So he speaks of this original unity, the demiurge, the creator of the universe, this builder being who first manifests in 3 values. And these 3 initial values, from which all others unfold, would be will, love, and intelligence. Therefore, all virtues, I once gave a lecture on this topic, discussing how all human values and virtues unfold from these 3. As if they branched out from these 3, will, love, and intelligence. Let us talk a little about these 3, first of all, and how they can serve as tools of precaution and even, in a certain way, as healing tools or approaches for an already established psychological or psychiatric ailment. Let us begin with will. We will also need a long period of time, and I encourage those who are curious. There are already many years and many titles available on our new Acropolis channel on YouTube. There are lectures on everything you can imagine there, all related to philosophy. There is even one dedicated exclusively to will. It is one of the highest powers of the human being. In the Indian tradition, they call will Atma, that which is most elevated in the human being. Nowadays, we cannot use this word because it has become very diluted. It has turned into a synonym for desire. When I speak of will, I am referring to strength, to willpower, because that makes it clearer. Willpower, determination, this is what is most powerful within the human being. Human willpower is capable of irrigating deserts, draining swamps, diverting the course of comets, or, at least, it is initially considered that this is already possible. Isn't that so? In other words, it is capable of creating, of sustaining, of transforming, of recovering, or of renewing many things around us, with an ever-increasing tendency toward expansion. And therefore, if it is capable of acting so incisively upon things, it must also possess great power to act upon the creator of human things, in this case, the human being. Considering that our main and most fundamental creation is ourselves. I don't know if you've ever stopped to think about that. Nature does not need us to create flying machines. It already has plenty of flying bodies. It does not need fast objects. It has already created the speed of light. What it needs from us is for us to create ourselves. And this is our fundamental creation. And if the will can achieve so much in external creations, it is evident that it can also do so in the creation of ourselves, which is our essential task. So, if the will is so powerful, I often give an example, which is the funnel. A very simple example, perhaps even simplistic, please forgive me, but it is a good image. And sometimes an image can bring back information to us, as the saying goes, more than 1,000 words. I usually ask people to visualize a funnel. You can enter a problem in 1,000 different ways. But to get out, there is only one way, will. Many times, when we are in the midst of a difficulty, whether systemic or personal, we tend to cultivate the habit of analysis focused on the past. This is not bad, but it is not enough. If you stop there, you may end up shifting responsibility to others, victimizing yourself, and settling into complacency. It is as if there were a dirty mark on the wall. Someone walked by, bumped into something, and left a stain. I find out who it was, and then I settle into complacency. Every time someone says, "Wow, this wall looks ugly, so dirty," I reply, "Oh, but it was so-and-so." In other words, I don't pick up a cloth. I don't get the cleaning supplies and clean the wall. I simply assign blame and remain complacent. This is something that happens very often. The fact is, whatever it is that caused a problem, what brings about a solution is not just analysis focused on the past, but synthesis projected toward the future. I am here, and I want to get there. And I will get there. Do you know why? Because I want to. If I want it, I can, I will. As is attributed to Julius Caesar, who is said to have declared during his Gallic Wars, I came, I saw, I conquered. This is a good example of an expression of will. In other words, it doesn't matter how I got here, but I will get there, and it will be now. And it seems that, when we commit ourselves positively to the future, the information from the past that we need surfaces, it comes to light. And our latent powers also come to the surface. You may remember the fairy tales where the prince commits himself to saving the princess from the dragon. And along the way, as he pursues this noble, just, and good objective, he finds a magic sword, he finds a cloak of invisibility, he finds a bird that tells him a magic word. In other words, his latent powers begin to emerge along the way when he commits himself positively to life. And so it is with the human being. And used willpower leaves you stagnant within that funnel, seeking to find someone to blame in the past. And sometimes you even become complacent with the situation. It is something incredible, but it is a fact, and it is reported by many traditions. At a certain point, victimization gives us more pleasure than a possible cure. We begin to draw pleasure from it and do not want to leave that state. And when we sense that something is approaching that could take us out of it, we even distance ourselves from it. This turns into an addiction, something quite curious. Pardon me, not Gibran. In this case, Carlos Drummond de Andrade. He has a passage in a poem where he says, "This habit of suffering that amuses me so much is sweet." An Itabira inheritance. Do you remember that? This habit of suffering that amuses me so much. It was not only Drummond who was amused by it. Humanity also has this habit. So victimization arises when we do not use our will. Victimization arises. We begin to think that the whole world is plotting against us, that the entire world is persecuting us. Look, this is a gateway to pathologies, a door wide open and well paved. Guilt, who is to blame? Sometimes I even start to think I am to blame for everything. Then begins a process of losing self-esteem, of developing complexes, and a whole set of other concerning elements. Epictetus, that philosopher and former slave I mentioned, used to say, the extinction of guilt marks the beginning of moral progress. I believe, Epictetus, that psychological progress could also be added to this statement. The extinction of guilt. There are no guilty parties, only those who are responsible. I take responsibility and move forward to correct what has been done. What else? Blockages such as shyness, insecurity, and so on. They arise from the moment I feel powerless to envision a way forward into the future and to walk determinedly toward it. In other words, each of these things, if we were here together with me, a psychiatrist, he could explain to you. I do not feel authorized to do so, but he could reveal to you the pathologies related to these doors. These doors that open when the door of willpower closes. The feeling of powerlessness, of incapacity, for example, is also the mother of many pathologies, and all the complexes that arise from it. What else? Continuing still in relation to willpower, one of the elements, one of the corollaries, one of the consequences that comes from it. Fear of what we reject and anxiety for what we desire. Since I am unable to move forward, I am held back. I cannot project my will into the future, to go toward what I want or to confront what I fear. Because I lack this initiative, I become trapped by the fear of what I dread and the anxiety for what I desire. And I remain in the expectation that something will either take this away from me or bring it to me. I myself feel powerless to do anything about it. Thus, this fear, which in a fair measure is natural, and this longing, which in a more basic sense is also acceptable, can both take a pathological path. And then there will be a breakdown in the psyche, which can often give rise to the derivative of this word. Breakdown, which is panic, along with many other consequences that would be better addressed by a specialist. Isn't that so? Therefore, those who act overcome and conquer. They neither desire nor fear. A person whose will is well developed and properly channeled will likely prevent fear and desire from entering this psychological sphere. There is a good chance of achieving this. And even if they cannot avoid it, they have a good chance of correcting the course caused by their misstep. Once they are able to channel their will, they possess the ability to rise, to recover from a moment of inattention, and to resume their path. Of course. Far be it from me, for heaven's sake, I live very closely with people who suffer from severe depression, acute anxiety, panic disorder, and so on. Far be it from me to suggest that someone in the midst of such a struggle can simply channel their will and overcome it. That is not what I am trying to say. In many cases, I would even say in the vast majority of cases, support from one of the areas I have already mentioned is necessary. In such cases, it is truly necessary to seek a therapist, to rely on medication, because the will becomes greatly weakened, even due to the organic reactions that this affliction causes. Far be it from me to make such an unreasonable claim. I am well aware that this support is necessary. That is not what I am saying. Please understand this clearly. What I am saying is that a person who, throughout their life, works to channel and project their will not be inexorable. There may be moments when it fails. But since this person knows the secret, the formula for recreating it, they can restore their will more easily than someone who has never worked to shape their own will. Let this be well understood. In other words, the practice of always moving toward the things we want or wish to overcome. This can help us in times of crisis, in moments of weakness when we all suffer, but we can recover that formula we have practiced at some point. That is true. What we do not master becomes autonomous within us. This is something very important for us to understand. Imagine that this arm of mine possesses tremendous power. We know, for example, the importance of the opposable thumb and precision grip in human evolution. Who here has studied this in anthropology? We understand the importance of this in evolution, including that of hominids. Now, imagine that I have never tried to control this arm of mine. For some reason, I have never tried to move it. One day, when I need to move it, I find I have no control. So I put all my physical energy into it, and what results is something disjointed. I will have to work for quite some time before I can achieve precise control over it, able to perform delicate tasks with this arm of mine. A desire that you have never controlled, that you have never worked with, when you try to handle it, it may manifest in aggressive, violent actions. It may seem like something you need to suppress, as if it were an evil, until you learn how to direct it. And that is truly how it is. I have seen people who began the process of developing some determination, some imposition of will over their lives, and their first attempts were a disaster. And they wanted, and in many cases even did, revert to a state of weakness, where they were gentler and not so aggressive. Do you know why? It is the autonomous and uncoordinated movement of something we have never worked to control. And if we do not work on it as soon as possible, we will have to go through this stage, because we cannot live without human will. It is fundamental. Certainly. Learning to control it may cause some harm, but never using it causes much greater harm. Love. It is also not possible for us to give a lecture. Look, it would not be a lecture. It would be a whole course just to talk about love. Think of a subject that unfolds across all civilizations, at every point in time and in every step, and that deserves a thorough approach. But we know very well that love is both a human potential and, at the same time, an imperative necessity for human beings. There is something curious about our education, which has become even more pronounced in recent times, that is, over the past century or so, where education, from our earliest childhood, is concerned with teaching us to master the physical body, but not the emotional or mental body. So, we do not really know how to handle this energy of ours, this effective phenomenon that is love. Just as we do not know how to manage our thoughts. Among us, it is a moment to speak of curious things. I remember during my undergraduate years at university, which was quite some time ago, a curious memory, I believe it still exists today, are those little cubicles for students in the library. Don't you find that amusing? They simply box the student in so that they can concentrate on reading. So, what happens then? The student, so cheerful and endearing, writes all sorts of things all over the little cubicle. The next person who comes along doesn't look at the book. Instead, they read what's written on the cubicle. I find that very amusing. In other words, we are far too easily distracted. We do not have control over our minds. Is it possible to do it? I believe it is. If we were willing to train ourselves in this, just as we train our legs when we walk. If I say, I will approach the armchair, legs, take me there, they take me. Imagine if I didn't have control over my legs and wanted to perform this simple action. How long would it take me to do that? And what if I could have that same control over my emotions and my thoughts? Thoughts focus here because I need to understand this in depth. Is it possible? It seems so. And with emotions as well. Poorly guided emotions tend to revolve around the one who possesses them, that is, selfishness. The use of others, the lack of empathy, these are three elements, a pathological potential that is present among us. They can give rise to serious psychopathologies, the use of others, insensitivity to the feelings of others. From this, a host of rather complex possibilities can arise. So, selfishness turns us into predators who use everything without concern, as if things have no more right to be here than we do. We end up leaving scorched earth behind us. There is a phrase by Leo Tolstoy, the great Russian novelist, which says, "There are those who walk through a forest and see only firewood for their own fire." From the universe of life that exists there, I only think about how it serves me. At no point is there any consideration of, how can I be of service to this? In other words, it is very difficult to love in this way, because love is a feeling with expansive tendencies. This is the attitude of a predator who moves forward leaving scorched earth behind. And this is already complicated, psychologically speaking. And the kind of love that sees the other merely as a witness to my personal experience, or as someone who is here to satisfy my feelings of loneliness and neediness. In other words, I treat the other as a means for my own personal satisfaction. Immanuel Kant, in his groundwork of the metaphysics of morals, said that there is nothing as immoral as treating a rational being, that is, a human being, as a means. The human being is always an end in themselves. How many times in a relationship, sometimes fleeting but sometimes even long-lasting, does one partner treat the other as a means to satisfy some personal need, with 0 degree of empathy, of putting oneself in the other's place, of understanding the other? I must note that my definition of empathy is wrong and incomplete from a psychological perspective. Empathy is not simply putting yourself in someone else's place. Empathy is to strip away your own personality and try to understand the world from the other person's point of view, with what they have lived, with their history, with their values, and not with mine. because otherwise you will deduce that what the other does is senseless, because if I were in their place, I wouldn't do it. But they are not you, and they are not inferior to you. They have another point of view that, perhaps, if you are willing to learn, can add to your own. In the Greek Orphic fragments, there is a phrase that I find wonderful, brief, which says, I offer you my mystery in exchange for yours. Do you understand this? I am not the owner of any truth. And true empathy is the desire to see the world from yet another angle, beyond my own, one as important as mine, which is yours. I see the world from your perspective and offer you mine. I offer you my mystery in exchange for yours. And we leave, as Hegel used to say, engaging in a dialectic thesis, antithesis, synthesis. We both come out greater because of it. If I do not consider myself the owner of any truth and maintain the spirit of a perpetual learner, this tremendously enriches the loving feeling, the very nature of a loving sentiment. I want to understand the world as you do, so that I can help you and you can help me. We exchange our points of view and grow together. This, too, is empathy today. Let me share something with you, something that is even a bit private, from the perspective of what I do. When a student sits in front of me to study philosophy, there are two fundamental things I hold. The first thing I make sure to convey is, first, I am not the owner of any truth. Second, I maintain a perpetual spirit of learning. This is foundational for philosophy, otherwise, it is impossible to take even the first step. Curiosity is also essential for love. For love, this premise is also fundamental. So, lack of empathy and using others are all potentially pathological. The development of true love, in its fullness and depth, would greatly contribute to humanity's immunity against a range of psychological and even quite serious psychiatric problems. And lack, too, is another element to be taken into consideration. Loneliness and lack, these are feelings that also arise from absence, from love that is not fully developed. Love fulfills itself when it is well practiced. There is a poem I greatly admire. It's long, and I cannot recite it from memory. Otherwise, I would be pleased to share it with you. But in one of its verses, it says that the greatest reward for one who loves, it is precisely the act of loving. Do you understand this? And there is a philosophical phrase from a 20th century thinker named Nilakanta Sriram. He used to say, you must lose your heart every day, and then go in search of it. In doing so, you will realize that your heart is the heart of all things. I leave my heart behind when I say good morning, looking into the eyes of the person passing by, and truly wishing them well. I leave my heart when I hold the elevator door open, and I wait for people to exit before entering, instead of bringing a wall of anxiety behind me. When do I leave my love? I leave home earlier so as not to add stress to people in traffic that is already so stressful in itself. When you look back at night, you will see that you have left your heart imprinted on every step you climbed. When you do this, you spread your heart to the four corners of the world. Love sustains itself. Very little longing remains. Longing, which is natural to a certain extent, becomes acute and concerning when we hold back too much in our capacity to share love. A love that you go on spreading to the four corners of the world. Wherever you are, when do you leave your heart's imprint? In every place you have been, it sustains itself. It gives you a profound sense of autonomy. And then you are prepared to receive love. But not to become dependent, nor to demand this love from others. To receive it willingly when it comes, but not to create a relationship of dependence or even of expectation toward others, which is very complex and also opens the door to a series of complications, especially within a healthy relationship. And now, moving on to intelligence. Intelligence, etymologically speaking, already says a lot. It comes from intelliger, the origin of the word, which means to choose among, intelliger, to choose among. Intelligence has much to do with discernment, the capacity to choose. And it is said that the greatest of all choices is the act of choosing, among all the things the world offers for you to be, who you truly are. In other words, the greatest intelligence of all, astonishing as it may seem, it is identity. It is finding oneself amid all that the world suggests, or even tries to impose, that you should be. And it is fundamental. Both intelligence and identity, which is its corollary and consequence in our lives. It is both a necessity and a source of fulfillment. It is remarkable how much we feel the lack of understanding the world. From that child who so deeply impressed me and asked their mother those fundamental questions. I keep remembering my young daughters because, of course, my own questions. Unfortunately, we do not remember them. But I remember how curious they were about everything. My daughter could barely speak properly when she turned to me and asked, "Mom, why do cats have tails?" Can you imagine an adult being concerned with asking that kind of question? You might say, "What nonsense, what silliness, why?" Why is it that, sometimes, on a plant, the leaves grow in a spiral around its stem? I remember some details, when I was a bit older, how I would look at the wall. And I was so amazed that a crack in the wall could form a pattern similar to the spirals of the plant out in the garden. And that is exactly how it happens. It follows a sequence that we know, an arboreal sequence, the phi, which is present everywhere. I was extremely curious, wondering why those ants walk in a line like that. There must be some purpose to it. Sometimes it was difficult for me to go from one place to another, because I would pay attention to so many things along the way that I ended up being late. And we lose the vital curiosity to understand the reasons behind life. In small things, you find a parallel to the great things. By thoroughly cleaning a window, one time I looked outside and thought, wow, how much better I can see the landscape of my backyard. And if I clean better inside myself, my ideas, my feelings, wouldn't I be able to see myself with greater depth? If I try to remove from there all that is pollution, all that is contamination that comes from outside, wouldn't I see myself more clearly? Wouldn't I know myself better? And that's exactly what happened. My attempt in this direction was a success. You begin to develop a symbolic mindset. Intelligence becomes a necessity, and at the same time, it is an accomplishment. Because even a small conclusion you reach is a moment of ecstasy. We nourish ourselves with ideas. Precisely because we no longer know how to nourish ourselves with ideas, to be more correct in conjugation, that we are manipulated by so many people who have no ideas at all, but only a highly fallacious play on words. We are manipulated far too much, my friends. I have even reached the point, in order to convince a class of mine, a group of students who told me that I had to read a certain trendy book. I went so far as to buy this trendy book. Never before had I had so much free time, but I bought it and conducted a logical analysis of the book. I came to the conclusion that, from the very first premise to the final conclusion, there was not a single original idea within that book. There was only an unfolding of fashionable ideas. Not a single idea contributed by the author himself. And this in almost 300 pages. And it was a book that ranked among the top 10 bestsellers, a bestseller of its time. How common this is. Because we do not love ideas, we do not cherish them, we have lost the ability to be enraptured by them, and we do not know how to recognize when they speak to us. This creates the perfect conditions for all kinds of manipulation. Therefore, intelligence is both a necessity and a source of fulfillment. When it is not used, we are left without identity, as we have already discussed, and without discernment. It is from the moment I have intelligence, I have an identity. I am Lucia. Who is Lucia? The one whose purpose in life is to reach a greater degree of justice and fraternity than I have today. I recommend that your life purpose always be associated with human values, which do not expire and justify your entire life. Therefore, I know that when I am moving in that direction, I am being true to Lucia. When I am not, I am outside of myself. I know that when I am heading in this direction, I am just, fraternal, and honest. The opposite direction is the opposite of all these things. What is the value of a person who does not know where they are going? What is right for someone who does not know where they want to arrive? I want to reach this television set. Now it is right, now it is wrong. I do not want to reach anywhere. What is the value? Mine? Is it what everyone thinks? Is it what is fashionable? Discernment, how do I make choices if I do not want to build anything? Notice, then, that intelligence generates identity, and that identity protects us in many ways, including from manipulation, which is also an element that reduces us to half of ourselves. All men die, but not all men truly live. Some merely survive. And this survival, this half-lived life, as Gibran would say, is also a source of various pathologies, of frustration, and many different ailments. Because the half that we do not develop is missed by us. And it creates within us a pain for something we do not even know what it is. Without thoughts and even feelings of our own. The example of the back seat, which is quite simple, very straightforward. Imagine that life is a journey you choose. If you drive your vehicle here, in the front seat, steering in the direction you have consciously chosen, or in the back seat, blindfolded, being driven, not knowing by whom nor to where. You only demand that the back seat be comfortable and that there is good onboard service. This is exchanging identity, the purpose of life, for mere comfort and pleasure. We are greatly encouraged to do this today. We do absolutely nothing, but it is a comfortable nothing. Evidently, nothing will not fulfill the same needs that everything would. This will also generate frustration. This will also generate emptiness. We trade our identity for comfort. And here, there are countless examples I could give, which are very present in what we call our current culture. The inducement to equate fulfillment with the law of least effort. Very, very, very common. A happiness of stones, not of human beings. It would be a great waste of the vast potential a human being possesses to reduce it to that of a mere stone. And nature does not waste. It did not create us for that. We chase after impossible and insufficient models of happiness. So, what is happiness within this model? A study was once conducted at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. They carried out this research. They took samples from 10 different points, from the globe, the most diverse, to find out what happiness meant to those people. And they got an answer, with a standard deviation, curiously, very low. Happiness for these people was a consumption pattern equivalent to that of an average American man. Peace, amen. A very low standard deviation. Most people answered something like this, said in different ways. We all know, using a very simplistic mathematical model, that if we take the consumption pattern of an average North American man, and if we multiply it by more than 7 billion human beings, we don't have a planet even for 5 years, let alone a decade. Nature cannot bear it. It cannot pay that price. Therefore, we are condemned to dream of a model of happiness that is impossible, mathematically speaking. So, we are led to seek, to substitute this impossible happiness in the realm of fantasy, and we unfold. in the realm of escape, and we unfold. Escape can take the form of fantasy, it can become an addiction, and here the market offers an enormous variety. When you fight one addiction, another is automatically created. In other words, you have only fought one path of extrapolation, one catharsis for your frustration. Soon enough, another is created, and another, and another, and another. A human being who is not happy with what they do, with the life they live, will seek escape even through smoke signals, let alone through the internet, social networks, and so on. Anyone who is frustrated will seek to escape. They will turn to addictions, some more compromising than others, if, indeed, we can even establish such a rigid scale in whatever it is that steals life away from us. And this is a form of slavery, yet another form of slavery. Epictetus listed several of them. This is yet another one we could consider. Addiction, the escape from one's own life, is a form of slavery. Sometimes it is difficult to reverse. It comes at a high price to overcome. And it is also pathological, evidently. The use of our attributes, that is, the use of will, love, intelligence, and everything that derives from them brings us fulfillment. It is interesting for us to observe a feeling, the feeling of duty fulfilled, of a day lived with true humanity. To see what psychological state this brings about. A state of plenitude, of completeness, the sleep of the just, kits with heavens and earth. Happy with the trace we have left in the world today. And this completeness, this fulfillment, it protects us. It does not leave voids through which foreign elements can enter. Therefore, it increases our immunity in the psychological realm. It increases our immunity in the mental realm, specifically speaking. Thus, a fulfilled human being has no voids or emptiness to be filled by foreign elements. And human fulfillment, like the fulfillment of all things, lies precisely in being what it truly is. Have you ever noticed how wonderful that is? Everyone has seen it, haven't they? A beautiful sunrise or sunset. Sometimes we travel on vacation to the seaside just to watch a sunset or a sunrise. Brasilia is also rich in sunrises and in marvelous sunsets, isn't it? Now, in the springtime, when we begin to look at that little plant in our garden, which stayed quiet all year long, and then flowers begin to awaken. How wonderful that is, how beautiful. Imagine a human being who fulfills themselves as does what is theirs to do within the scheme of nature. The sunrise and sunset are the earth, turning and doing what is its role in the scheme of nature, around the sun. A flower that blooms is a plant fulfilling its role within the scheme of nature, within the cycle of the seasons. A human being fulfilling their purpose is as beautiful as a sunrise, or as a sunset, or a flower blossoming in spring. It means a being who is in harmony with themselves, who is fulfilled. And this sense of wholeness leaves no voids through which foreign elements might enter, at least not very deeply. Each being fulfills itself by being what it truly is. Pindar had another phrase that I am very fond of. Be who you are, knowingly. Interesting, isn't it? Discover it. Dive deeply within yourself and find your human potentials, the values that nature has given you as possibilities. Realize these values, and in doing so, you become truly human. To be who you are, that is, we are human, in potential. Fulfill this potential by knowing, within this toolkit that nature has given you, what lies inside and learning how to use it. Make the fullest possible use of it. Go to the very limits of your possibilities in exercising your human potentials. And you will bring to the utmost your psychological immunity, reaching the highest limits of your potentialities. This is indeed preventive, and it can also be curative. When we recover, we gain that breath of clarity through good therapy, through effective medication, that breath of lucidity. Seek to develop this antidote, for it is truly valuable. And this phrase from Pindar is very similar, or the know thyself from philosophy. Be who you are by knowing. Strive to know who you are. Seek to discover all your latent powers and use them. Use these tools so that they do not become autonomous and aggressive. Use your tools, and you will see that you will have a very high immunity in these areas. We will see that, throughout history, those who fully utilized their potential were people with a profound sense of motivation, with a deep commitment to life, right up to their final moments. And people with these two characteristics leave very few gaps for more serious elements to penetrate. Very few gaps. It can happen, but perhaps it will not reach so deeply. There has never been a serious statistic about this, but it seems to me, and I believe you will agree with me, that Mohandas Gandhi, in his efforts to free India from English imperialism, was unlikely to fall into deep discouragement because the interval between one idea and another, one movement and the next, was too short for profound discouragement to take hold. It was perpetual motion. He himself says in his autobiography, My Life and My Experiments with Truth, that there was not a single day when he did not conceive a new idea. The space between one idea and the next was quite small. That is it. The fulfilled person overflows, nourishes, heals. Consider this Indian proverb. It belongs to the Vedanta school in Hindu tradition. See what a marvelous proverb this is. The tree does not taste its own fruit. The river does not drink its own waters. The clouds do not rain upon themselves. The strength of the strong must be used for the benefit of all. This is another attribute that derives from love, which is generosity. The more I think about the needs of others, of the whole, whether they are my friends, my family, my community, or humanity as a whole, the less my own pains hurt within me. I have taught this a great deal during the pandemic. One act of generosity per day. You will see how discouragement, dejection, and the feeling of powerlessness diminish. When I think of the whole, my own suffering is put into perspective. It reveals its true size. If I look only at it, it seems like a dragon about to devour me. Isn't that so? When I think of others, of the whole, my own troubles become smaller. And that is what this proverb teaches. This is the work, the masterpiece of generosity. Committing yourself to the whole minimizes many of your personal problems. That is why an idealist, a person who takes responsibility for life, who is committed to life, is someone with few openings for more serious problems to enter. It is possible, yes. Can it happen momentarily? It can. But you also have the tools to overcome it. Good immunity, without vacuums or emptiness, with great determination and the ability to dedicate oneself. Virtues that nowadays we hardly even remember exist, right? Determination and the ability to devote yourself to a dream, to an ideal that gives meaning to your entire life. Cicero, the great Roman orator and philosopher, used to say, make sure that you are a positive influence in the lives of those with whom you share your journey. Can you imagine what Cicero meant by this? What he said to Lucilius, a person who faithfully follows this principle will have very few openings for evils to reach them deeply and paralyze them. Every day, I want to be a positive influence so that the people who have crossed my path are a little better for having been part of my life. So that the world is a little better because I existed. So that I myself am a little better, so that I do not live in vain, so that I may be a force for good. What a wonderful suggestion this is. Can there be moments of discouragement? There can be, and probably should be. Can there be moments of sadness? There must be many. But look, there's such a grip and such a deep surrender that pulls you forward, that there's no time to go too deep into that feeling. Because there's a propulsion engine pulling you forward at 1,000 miles an hour. You can't sink too deep. because you don't move forward and sink at the same time. These are two difficult movements to make. Therefore, you are pulled forward. This virtue of determination, responsibility, and dedication is wonderful. And those who have embraced it have generally experienced a psychological life that tended toward a greater degree of stability. Even when they fall, they rise more quickly. Because to fall is something we all experience. It is inexorable. Men with great missions and who are passionate about them, about these missions, seldom fell and always managed to rise again. I have seen this in history. I have already given you an example. Have you seen that wonderful film I always recommend, Schindler's List? What did that man do during one of the most difficult historical moments humanity has ever faced? In the very heart of Nazi Germany, he could have simply given in to despair. He could even have taken his own life, overwhelmed by depression in such a horrific time to be alive. Instead of dying, he dedicated his life to a greater cause, for he could have been killed at any moment. At any moment, if he were caught, he would have been executed. He decided that if his life had little meaning, it was like a beautiful plate of food. If I do not want a clean and wholesome plate of food, I give it to someone else, for there is much hunger in the world. If my life seems to have no meaning for me, now I offer it as a gift to the whole, to humanity. And that is what he did. A moment for such discouragement as that, truly, it is difficult. A moment to feel depressed like that, it is complicated. We are now living through a pandemic, but it is due to natural causes. Now, when it is the human being who provokes something of such gravity, it is difficult to believe in humanity, even to believe in oneself. And a man? That truly happened. That man was capable of doing that. Motivation, determination, and selfless dedication in a circumstance like that. A cause such as that, which managed to rescue him from the bottomless pit of apathy and depression, which is very easy to fall into at such a moment, in moments like that. Future karma is already India, once again, the Vedantic thought. I am very fond of this definition. Imagine that I am walking at my own pace, without forcing, without quickening my steps, neither in haste nor in pause, moving toward a moment in the future. Another person is also walking toward that same moment in such a way that they will cross your path at some point in the future. If you maintain your pace, without haste and without pause, you will become the opportunity this person has to regain their hope. They have suffered so much throughout life that, if you are not there for some reason, just beyond that point, there is an abyss. They have no hope left. This person does not know who you are. They do not even know that you exist. But their need to live, to recover their hope, children. It pulls you toward the future. Any waste of time, for any triviality you encounter along the way, will cause you to miss this commitment. And something or someone will fall into an abyss because you did not fulfill your commitment to life, which demanded nothing from you beyond what you could give. It required you to be faithful to your potential, to your pace, to your possibilities, and not to waste time in the moment. In the present moment, with trivialities, or by allowing dangerous voids to form that can hold you back for a long time, perhaps for your entire life. The need of the other, whose face you do not know, but whose existence you are certain of, pulls you toward the future. And what Shankaracharya says in this passage, who is the great Vedantic master, is precisely about this need. All of us should have absolute certainty that it exists, and that it draws us toward the future in this very moment. Reflect when you find yourself in a moment of inertia, when you don't want to get out of bed in the morning. All right, I will do this concession. I will neglect my commitments and grant this concession to inertia. What price I will pay? Human suffering. Someone awaits, and I won't be. You realize that this is a price that is morally far too high to pay. It is almost like a propulsion ball that, puff, throws you out of bed. It's incredible. Use this. It is a fantastic psychological exercise, and it is a good motivation for us to remain attentive to the voids, to the emptiness. And the commitment that it provides us for the future is a precious ally. Iamblichus, a great scholar, a Platonist, a follower of Plato, has this phrase, which is part of a longer passage that I have brought for you, which I find very beautiful when he speaks about the life of Pythagoras. He says the following: health of the body, virtue of the soul, purity of the intellect, and ascent toward our true principles. For him, this is human harmony. And for him, as for many traditions of the past, harmony is synonymous with health on all levels. Health of the body, virtue of the soul, purity of the intellect, and ascent toward our true principles, our true purposes, our true human ideals. And here he offers a recipe for health that encompasses what I have shared with you, as well as many other prescriptions that medicine can provide, for example, regarding physical health, or that psychiatry can offer concerning mental health. In other words, it encompasses a set of needs so that we do not lose balance and harmony, which is synonymous with health. Health is a state of harmony and balance. This is how it is in Ayurveda, Indian medicine, and in Chinese medicine as well. It was the same for Paracelsus, a physician of the Renaissance, and for many others throughout history. Illness is the result of conflict between mind, soul, and body. Mental and spiritual efforts are necessary for healing. And this is what Dr. Edward Bach, founder and creator of Bach flower therapy, believed. In other words, I reiterate, he did not mean, nor do I believe, as I do. I also do not believe that this eliminates the need for you to undergo a specific treatment. I recommend that you pursue a specific treatment with a psychiatrist and a psychologist. But in moments of clarity, work to deactivate the triggers. And to deactivate the triggers, remember his advice. Seek to reconcile the conflict between mind, soul, and body. Carl Gustav Jung, the father of analytical psychology, used to say a phrase that I truly appreciate. Body and mind together at all times. If you follow Dr. Edward Barr's advice, you bring body, mind, and soul together. The soul is that subtle plane, with nothing theological about it. It is that subtle realm where dwell your values and your virtues, your principles of life. That realm of ideas where your life goals and your human purposes reside. Body, mind, and soul together, always. There is no void, there is no imbalance. And if this imbalance has already arisen, seek to promote this realignment. Align body, soul, and spirit once again. The human purpose sought by philosophy has the power to unify both within and without. In other words, to restore our inner health and also help restore the social health of the world. The more within, the more without, says philosophy. And this is truly how it works. To conclude, as we are already running out of time, I have brought just 2 quotes. This is the most beautiful concept of happiness I have ever seen in my life. It belongs to Epictetus. In the manual of Epictetus the philosopher, in the Enchiridion, he says this: happiness is a verb. It is the continuous, dynamic, and permanent performance of acts of value. Our life is built moment by moment and has meaning for us and for the people we touch. It is a verb. It is beneath every step you take when you act as a human being. And it is a powerful antidote against cracks, against gaps, through which elements enter that disrupt our inner harmony. And finally, this phrase, forgive me, is from the philosopher and Spanish writer Miguel de Unamuno. The roots of trees dream with the waters of the sky. If the roots of trees, which are there, deep within the earth, cry out for waters from the sky, could it be that human roots are also yearning for answers that come from the heavens? From that realm of ideas? From that spiritual plane, which is precisely values, virtues, and wisdom? Is it not these waters that they need? When a plant becomes ill, you might say it lacked the waters from the sky. It did not rain. When a human being falls ill, could it also be that the waters from the sky were missing? Now, a specific therapy must be applied. The problem has already set in, but isn't it also necessary to ensure that the waters from the sky come and fill the void that was left behind? I believe so. And this, I believe, is a very timely and much needed contribution that philosophy offers for the promotion of mental health.